Well, the new shock results Iowa poll from pollster Ann Selzer has been blowing up everybody's news feeds, and for good reason. It is just one poll.
Smart politicians trust the voters, not the polls.
And we should put it in the context of what's going on more broadly in the polling as we're getting in the final polling before Election Day, including the big new poll from NBC News today. The top line of that one is that it's a tie, 49 for Harris, 49 for Trump. Even as the NBC poll shows a national deadlock, there's a couple of internal numbers that the pro-Harris side in particular is latching onto. For one, black voters in the NBC poll support Harris by a margin of 87% to 9%. In context, that's a 3-point larger margin with black.
Wow, wow, wow. Folks, this was just one of thousands of bogus polls that were done to shape the narrative. This was a poll by NBC, and it shows her huge advantage over Trump among black voters. They needed to be above 90%. Biden barely won and got somewhere between 91 and 92%. Barack Obama was at 95, 96%. Clinton was right around the 90, 91%, and we all know she lost. But you know what they didn't tell you about? They didn't tell you about the New York Times poll that came out, said that she was bleeding black votes, both from black women. Now, of course, she was going to win, of course, the majority of black women, the majority of black men. But nearly 1 in 4 black men voted for Trump, and he got about 45% of the Latino men. I think he got nearly 11 or 12% of black women as well. But what poll did they show you? And then what you saw in the opening, the Iowa poll? Folks, these polls were just meant to shape the narrative that they wanted. That, yeah, it's close, but guess what? She's still in the lead. And they were all bullshit polls.
Then Biden won in 2020.
I think you underestimate the good citizens of Gotham City, Chief.
Even though so much recent conversation about this campaign has centered on Harris supposedly having a slipping standing with black voters, in the NBC poll, she's doing better with black voters than Biden did.
They made the case that the country is racist, right? Joe Biden got more of the black vote than Kamala Harris.
Right.
I mean, you just can't
Told ya.
demonize everybody
He
for
almost
deciding
got
not to.
1/4 of the black men,
Because-
24%.
Right.
To me this morning as a rolling realignment where you have these disaffected voters who are upset because they're not doing as well as they were doing 4 years ago. And
Shocking.
It is not based on race. It is based on class, because Donald Trump has brought in all these new Hispanic voters and black voters, for example, and the Democrats are left being the party of the elite, which they feel has
And the
nothing to
rich.
do with them.
How can it be?
Human mechanisms are made by human hands, Robin. None of them is infallible.
He won rural Anson County, North Carolina. 40% African-American population. It's only the second time since Reconstruction that a Republican won Anson County, North Carolina. He won.
Think about that, folks. Second Republican win since Reconstruction in this tiny little rural county, Anson, North Carolina. 40% black Americans, second time it's been won. Absolutely stunning.
Starr County in Texas, the first time a Republican has won the county in 128 years. It's mostly Latino county there on the.
But guess what? Longest Democratic voting streak on the tip of Texas. But what do you hear? Like people like Sunny Hawson, who's a race traitor, race hater, race baiter, also cultural appropriator. What does she say? Oh, the reason that happened? Racism, misogyny, and sexism. Those are the reasons why Latino men went for Donald Trump. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. These people are never going to learn, but the data shows that Trump overwhelmingly beat her in every category, every demographic, every age group. I mean, it's just virtually a clean sweep, folks. Virtually a clean sweep.
Mexican border.
I never would have believed that the polls could be wrong.
There have been other candidates who've trusted too much in the polls, Mayor Linseed, and they found out that it's the votes that count.
As we do get our final look before actual vote starts to come in from actual voters on Tuesday, let's bring in our friend Steve Kornacki, who was made for this and who is standing by at the big board with so much energy and stamina to spare. Steve, we're looking at you at the top of the mountain right now, my friend.
Well, here we go, Rachel, and look,
ready
when it
to
comes to the
spin
polling
once
right now,
again.
I think the safest thing to say is there are some extremely mixed signals that are coming in. You just talked about
In other words, here comes the spin. Here comes the BS.
Iowa, obviously, a state Donald Trump won by nearly 10 points the last two elections. Now, at least in that Des Moines Register poll, having Harris slightly ahead. It's the question of what is happening in Iowa itself.
Bullshit
because
was happening.
Obviously, you talked to Ann Selzer right there. One of the questions is, does this spill over to other states? Does this reflect something, if this is what's happening in Iowa, that might be happening in other states, maybe states we haven't been?
Now, Steve Kornacki has been at this a very long time. For a poll to come out, things don't swing 10, 12 points in 1 or 2 days unless you're absolutely fudging the data and putting out bullshit polls. And that's exactly what Ann Alka-Seltzer, which is what she's taking these days, and probably drinking to excess. But Steve Kornacki didn't want to do this. Again, the narrative was being pushed out there that if something is happening in these Iowa polls, well, what does that mean for all the other polls? I mean, could Texas actually turn blue now? Could Florida go? Could Ohio? If Iowa's there, this is the narrative that these hucksters, these fraudsters were trying to spin onto the American people to put out what? A narrative so that maybe some people that just didn't have all the information or just disinterested voters, but at the very end said, maybe I'll go vote. Oh, you know what? Wow, that's happening. Oh, this person's endorsing her. Oh, yeah, you know what? She looks like they're saying she's going to win. Okay, I'll go ahead and vote that way. It's all about narrative, folks. It's all about how you spin it.
Talking about maybe some of the other battleground states.
Right there, Trump wins the 6 electoral votes of
What
Iowa.
happened?
And so we can see the breakdown there with about half the vote counted.
What
there.
happened?
So there was this thought that perhaps because of his restrictive abortion ban that just went into effect in July, and this highly respected pollster coming out, highly respected pollster, that perhaps there was going to be a wave of independent women who could somehow turn this red state blue, but this was not to be, Chuck.
No, I mean, look,
No shit,
this
Sherlock.
is a miss because this looks exactly the way Iowa looked 4 years ago. You know, we're in margin of error range there. So, look, she thought she'd found something
This
with
is the pollster that we're talking about.
She lied.
Experience teaches slowly, Robin, and at a cost of many mistakes.
This is our running average. We've been keeping this the entire summer and fall of the quality polls in all of the battleground states. And a couple things jump out here. Well, obviously, they're all close. You don't see a margin here of greater than 1.9 points. You do see a bit of a north-south divide. We've seen this lately in the polling. Trump's leads here, very small, but
They were
Arizona,
so wrong on
Georgia,
Arizona.
North Carolina, basically Sun Belt states.
All of them, they were
Harris's
wrong.
best performances in here, Wisconsin.
CNN projects that Donald Trump has won Wisconsin.
1.8 in Michigan.
NBC now projects he is the winner of Michigan and its 15 electoral votes. State that Joe Biden won in 2020 by nearly 3 points.
These are the northern tier states. 0.3 of a point in Pennsylvania.
We have a major projection.
Wonder what it could
CNN
be.
projects that Donald Trump will win the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This is a huge, huge achievement for Donald Trump and a huge bucket of electoral votes, 19 of them, for his path back to the presidency.
And if that holds, if that cements, that is ultimately good news for Harris because Michigan, plus Pennsylvania, plus Wisconsin, if there are no surprises outside of the battleground, would for Harris equal 270 electoral votes. If the action really is limited to the battleground, Donald Trump has to win one of those 3 northern tier battleground states where our averages continue to show Harris with slight leads in those states.
It's the narrative.
Slight leads in those states. And politically, similar movement here. We have not, for the most part, seen in Wisconsin the kind of polling shift we just saw in that new Iowa poll today. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If it potentially could be a state-specific thing, but if it's not, if it's spilling over, this is a place where you would expect to see it on Tuesday night. Sort of an eye test here. I'm going to show you what the map looked like in these rural blue-collar counties. Look at all that red. Here was Obama. Look at all that blue.
Wow.
Not that long ago, Democrats were competitive in rural blue-collar.
But they'll say that these blue wall states are all racist. They're bigoted. They would never vote for a person of color. When Obama won, the 200 counties that that went Democratic for Obama, in 2016, those same counties, 200 plus, went for Trump. So don't tell me that those counties are racist or bigoted. They went for the candidate at that time that they thought was speaking to them and their concerns and what they wanted out of their candidate.
Areas. Now they're getting absolutely blown out. And what that means for Democrats is in a state like Wisconsin and others, if they're going to have any chance, they really rely on the suburbs and the cities. They really rely on the suburbs and the cities.
Look at her face.
Are there any places that the vice president is overperforming Joe Biden in 2020? So we could show you that as well. We just bring that out here. Harris overperforming in 2020.
Holy smokes. Holy smokes.
No places. Zip. Zero, nada, was Kamala Harris overperforming Joe Biden. Let that sink in, folks. Just let that politically sink in. Nowhere across the United States was she overperforming Joe Biden.
There you go. So let this go away and see if there's anything on the east side there.
Literally nothing?
Nothing.
Literally not one county?
Literally not one county.
I mean, not to be boring here for a second, but just getting
which you
very
always
real.
are.
We now are just another one in the list of countries that has decided to, hey, what the heck? Let's try the strongman thing. Let's let democracy go. Let's put in an all-powerful.
Yeah, because we certainly didn't want a weak candidate, a weak woman candidate, period. That's right. I'll take a strong man for president over a weak woman candidate any time of the day. There are many, many strong women candidates. There certainly are. And when they decide to run, that's the one that will one day be elected president of the United States. But until you have a strong woman candidate who is absolutely on principled on her points, isn't a liar, isn't a faker, isn't a fraudster, can answer questions without doing word salads, means what she says, has a strong political track record, that's when the United States of America will have a strong female candidate become president. Until then, it's just not going to happen.
Powerful guy instead, see how it goes. There are many more countries in the world governed by that kind of a system than there are governed by ours. We are the only 248-year-old multiracial, pluralistic democracy in the world.
That's right. Thank God for that. Shall we keep
it? A lot of our
it?
fellow Americans say we shouldn't. Now we know. Now we know for sure.
We
You're such an ass.
Too harshly,
God, she's
Robin.
such an ass.
Even with the best intentions, it's hard to change a lifetime of habit.
They're counting on the half the country that voted against them, the half the country that doesn't want to give up our system of government. They're counting on all those tens of millions of Americans to be despondent, to feel powerless, to check out, which of course would mean letting them do what they want, letting them run the table. What they really don't want
Tell us.
is for the half the country that voted against them, the half the country that wants to keep our democracy,
And the Constitution is the cornerstone of our great nation. We must abide by it.
Gosh, when you put it that way, Batman, how can I help but agree?
Feeling, sure, regretful about the election outcome.
Self-control is sure tough sometimes, Batman.
All virtues are, old chum. Indeed, that's why they're virtues.
And we should put it in the context of what's going on more broadly in the polling as we're getting in the final polling before Election Day, including the big new poll.
I never would have believed that the polls could be wrong.